All right, so welcome back, everybody. So yesterday we got to take a look at how to customize QuickBooks, because once you set up your profile and your company file, it's most important that you do customize it. Even if you are setting up your items, which is anything that has to do with your selling process, right? Making a list of everything that you sell. Now, here, I'm going to go ahead and skip forward to chapter 4 because it's important that we get to take a look at how we utilize those items as part of things that we expense for, or in this case, take a look at bills for the first time. And then we'll revert back and then go ahead and take a look at what happens for the sales process. The sales process is a two-part thing, right? Chapter 2 and chapter 3 are basically one chapter combined because it's the sales process. It deals with the whole entire customer, and it's split into two. So I'm excited for that. So that's next week. But for today, let's focus on just learning about the expenses. So again, at the beginning of every single chapter, right, it tells you exactly which portable file to open up. So they want you to open up the expenses 18 file. Okay. Now, as we go through this, you are going to take a look at the whole bills section in the home page. So as we've mentioned before, right, the home page is basically the graphic depiction of the flow of a transaction, right? When we take a look at how a transaction works, it's important that you know what comes next, especially for those who are unfamiliar with accounting. This is a perfect, this is perfect for you because it's kind of like a cheat sheet. Well, if I enter in a bill, what happens there? Well, then I have to pay the bill. Straightforward. And we'll take a look about this when we dive into chapter 2 as well. It's like when we enter in an invoice, we just follow the lines and then you're supposed to receive a payment and then you follow the line and you're supposed to, it just goes right into the deposits. So everything here is a graphic depiction of a transaction, and today we're just focusing on this right here, which is entering in bills and paying them off, okay? Now we also have to take a look at the difference between a cash vendor versus a credit vendor. Pretty straightforward, right? When you have your vendors that you often pay with cash, okay, those are your cash vendors. Anybody that you deem to either owe money or have on a credit. So for example, if you have an account with that person, you receive some kind of credit limit, that's going to be obviously your credit vendors, okay? Now, of course, that's also depicting on what kind of basis you should actually use. So if they're cash vendors, right? Typically, it'd probably be on a cash basis. Now, of course, you can also, under accrual, you can make your payments to your vendors using cash. There's no crime about that. But when we're dealing with accrual basis, right, and we deal with our credit vendors, therefore, we start using what's called the accounts payable account. Accounts payable account is basically an account that allows you to owe your vendors like money, right? You tell them, I'd like to purchase something, can you place it on an account? Or if I purchase something, I'll pay you back later. And usually with that, it's depending on your relationship with your vendor, right? Most cases, if you agree that you pay them later, you just pay them within 30 days, okay? Financing is a completely whole separate issue, right? If you're purchasing an asset and you finance it, then that's going to be, completely separate. But it is still considered a credit to a vendor. And, of course, that's going to be something else, but we're mainly focusing on, purchasing or making those expenses. So example, we'll take a look at rent expense, right? You're going to make that expense, and we can either have two options, right? Either record the bill and then pay later, or we could actually just cut them a check and call it a day. So that's the difference between the cash and credit vendors. Now, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the vendor center, because this is going to be one of the most important things that you do, or that you need to see. Okay, so at the home page, right, at the very, very top of the section, you're going to see there's a little blue tab that says vendors. Okay, that is, if you click on here, that is your vendor center. Okay, you also can access the vendor center on the icon bar. If you roll down, it's going to be right after your customers. You got your vendors. That right there is your vendor center. Okay, and of course, if you go up to the menu bar under vendors, okay, first thing that you should see is vendor center. So let's go ahead and take a look at the vendor center. Okay, so the vendor center is pretty much your place to be able to create your transactions between you and your vendor, right? So let's take a look at just what is there. So on the left side, right, gives you a list of every single vendor here, okay? So you can have as many vendors that you like, as long as it's less than 14,500, right? So here, right, they're in alphabetical order, and notice this: they right next to them they have account balances. Okay, so every time you make a transaction with a vendor, whether it's a cash or credit type of vendor, this right here is basically going to be giving you an overview of how much you actually owe them. Okay, so in this case, if it's a cash vendor, you pay them immediately, so therefore you don't owe them. However, if it's a credit vendor, they'll usually send you a bill and you have X amount of days to pay it off. So here it records to you. So the minute you enter in a bill, it will start recording in accounts payable, right? It's creating more debt and an obligation that you have to pay. So here is going to be an example. So we have we have two things that are in here. We have sales, the State Board of Equalization, which we got to take a look at yesterday, right? That's your tax that you owe, okay? And then you also owe another person named Wong and Son, okay? Now, once again, your vendor center, right? Every time you click on an individual person, on the right side, you get a little like brief synopsis or, a brief screenshot of their information, right? Usually it's just the basic ones like their name, their address, etc., right? Really, really basic information that you could see right then and there. Now, of course, each vendor has their own profile, which when we take a look at entering in our very first vendor, you're going to see that there's more details than what appears on this little screen right here. So once again, this is just like, it just shows you the basic information. There's things that you can do. You can, at the very, very top, you see here, there's a little paper clip. So you can enter in any, business cards, anything that you see deemable that is collecting information about this vendor. So that's really cool about that too. All right, and then there's a little pencil icon that allows you to edit the information. You can edit the vendor's information at any given time, whether it's necessary, right? Let's say I made a typo. You can go in and edit it, no problem. So this right here, this profile, you can accumulate as much information and edit it as you go. You're not obligated to just enter it in one time and that's it. So when we dive into looking at what a quick add is, okay, Then you create a quick ad. It's just the name. And what happens is after you finish your transaction, if it seems necessary for you to go ahead and enter in as much details or edit the information, then you may do so. But most cases, quick ads, you just have their name, and then probably the most that you'll have is just probably their address. Okay, so other than that, that's usually what happens here on the right side. Now below that is going to be every single transaction that exists between you and this vendor. So this is where all your transactions are going to lie. Now, as you can see up here, this is going to be very important, especially when when we enter in a few transactions. And I'll go ahead and show you a few. Show you how to use this section in a couple pages down below. But this is exactly where you could find all the transactions that happen between you and this particular vendor. Okay, so now we have the layout situated. Now this is where, once again, we can enter in all of our transactions that deal with a vendor. So first, usually rule here is that you can go up to the very top here under the gray bar. You see that there's new transactions. If I click that, I can enter a bill, I can pay a bill, I can, record, I can make a purchase order, okay? So that's just at the very top. That's when you just want to do a generalized one. Now, if you click on a particular person, right? So remember, if this is their profile, if you go down to manage transactions, you'd be able to enter in the same exact transactions as well. But this one's more particular geared towards the actual individual, not a general transaction. So in this case, I could still enter a purchase order, item receipt, bill. I could pay a bill, right? I can enter a check, a credit card. So this is what you could do when you're actually looking at a vendor. Now, the one that's more extensive would be is if you were to click on that person and right click them. Here you could do a little more. You can create statements upon them. You can write a check. Other than that, like you can create a report on them, open balance expenses. Like there's a little more that you could do with this one, okay? When you're looking at right clicking at that exact person. So once again, the vendor center is going to be where you do majority of your transactions. However, here's the great thing too. Remember when we talked about what the menu bar does? The menu bar does essentially everything that the vendor center does do. So if I click on my vendors menu, here's all the transactions I can do when it comes to a vendor. And some of them extend out too. Okay. So when we talk about vendors, right, it's associated with another section, right? Because a vendor could be anybody that could be a supplier to us. They could be someone who's an independent contract. They could be someone who's just a mere person that helps you operate your business. So for example, we talk about rent expense, right? So who's the person who owns the property? Okay. So vendors are anybody that helps you operate your business. Okay. Okay. Now, you can also sell to a vendor as well. A vendor can be a customer as well, okay? But just know that if that were to happen, right, we'll read this in chapter 2, is that if a vendor is both a customer as well, unfortunately, QuickBooks is not able to be able to tell the difference because remember, it's the name that is the concerning part, right? If QuickBooks can hold a bunch of names together, right? The one idea here is that if you have the identical name, QuickBooks is not going to make an association whether it's a vendor or a customer. So you have to make some kind of unique change or something that makes it unique so that you can tell the difference between the vendor and a customer, right? If it's the same exact person. However, the information, just such the addresses, they can match 100%. It's just the name that cannot match. Okay. But other than that, just exactly like that, we're going to go ahead and talk about entering in our first vendor. Okay. So everybody should be on this page right here, setting up your vendors, which is going to be page 100. Awesome. Okay. So let's go ahead and follow along and follow through this little window here. Now, there's a few things that you can and can't do when it comes to entering in a new vendor. Okay. So once we're in the vendor center, right? The only way that you can be able to enter in a vendor is through the vendor center. So I taught you 3 ways to enter in the vendor center, right? It's either the home page, right, with the little tab here. It's either the menu bar, the vendor's menu bar, or the icon bar, okay? And once you are in the vendor center, your only option is to click New Vendor. Now, if you click on New Vendor, you have another second option, right? You can either enter one vendor at one time, or you can add multiple vendors. So when I click on multiple vendors, right? See, then this is exactly what I mean by entering in a list. If you have an Excel sheet, right, that has a list of all of your vendors, that will be very useful because you can use the copy and paste tool on here. You can also even upload your Excel worksheet into here as well, or import, that's what they call it. Now, of course, that's more for advanced users of QuickBooks, right? The book doesn't tell you on how to enter in a vendor using the multi vendor. But as you look here, right, it's pretty simple. You just go down to the very, no, I don't want to touch that one. You just go all the way down to the very bottom, and when you see the open thing here, you can either type it right in. You can type in the vendor right here, and you could just enter in the information that you see is necessary for them. And it automatically will create a profile for them. So you can enter in multiple pieces of information at one time. Okay, so here, instead of going through each question or going through each form, you could just go ahead and fill it out here. Now, of course, I just wanted to show you this. So if you are using Excel and you're copying and pasting, just make sure that your columns align with the sections before you go ahead and do that. That's usually rule of thumb. When you do that is that you want to make sure that your columns align exactly how you could do it. So then you just simply copy and paste it in here. So once again, you can enter in information simultaneously. But in this case, I am not going to teach you that. I am going to teach you to just do it one at a time, okay? So we're going to go up to, once again, new vendors, and add new, okay? Now that's just one way you could do it. The second way that you could do it is simply going anywhere on the vendor list, and you right-click it. And you right-click new, okay? Right-click, new vendor, right? That's the only 2 exact ways you can enter in a vendor, okay? So once again, first step is you need to have access to the vendor center. Once you're there, you either click at the very top, new vendor, or you can right-click anywhere on the vendor center list and click on right-click and you have a new vendor, okay? Nowhere on the main menu will show you how to enter in a vendor, okay? Make sure that you're aware of that, okay? Again, your icon bar has nothing to do with entering a new vendor. Same thing with your home page, right? The home page is just the graphic depiction of your transaction, what transaction exists with the vendor. But setting up a vendor is going to be in your vendor center, all right? Setting up people will always be in the center that you are entering, whoever you're entering in, okay? Because that's not a transaction. That's just editing a profile. That's adding information into QuickBooks, okay? It's not a transaction, once again, okay? So you need to be able to have to be able to go and access the vendor center in order to add a new vendor, okay? So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and do the shortcuts. I'm going to right click and I'm going to click new vendor, okay? And when I click on new vendor, now notice this. On the left side of the panel, you've got a few options that you have to fill out for each vendor. Now, of course, you're not obligated to fill every single section out to like fill out every single bubble because sometimes you don't have that information. But it's definitely if you are looking into using this vendor frequently or making a relationship with this vendor, you definitely want to gather as much information as possible. But if you're just going to the grocery store and you're just making a simple purchase for, let's say, like some office supplies, or like you just happen to be on the road and you swing by an office supply store, you know, will you ever go back to that exact store? You know, maybe chances maybe, but as far as that, the information that you need for that particular vendor is probably not really. You don't really need that much information, okay? The most that you'll get is just the street address, okay? Because most cases you're not going to use that to ship items to you or anything like that. It's just a store that you just happen to drive by and you just picked up stuff from them. Okay, so those will still be your vendors because it's important that you keep track of where you bought the stuff because, and especially when we talk about entering in our receipts and stuff or bills, then that's where it's going to come into play because you definitely want to know exactly where you got that stuff from because in case for any issues that you have with the supplies or whatever that you bought from that person, you can return them. Okay? But as far as that, that's probably going to be one of the vendors that you don't really necessarily deem as someone that you want to collect as much information. So you don't necessarily have to fill out every single bubble here. Okay? But let's go ahead and look in the book and let's go ahead and fill out our vendor. So first one that we're going to be doing is Mr. Stephen Boswell from Boswell Consulting. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you this, especially this part is very important. So, if you decide to go ahead and enter in your vendor name at the top of here, you can enter it in here, but let's say you completely forget about this section here. If you enter it in here, it will automatically copy and fill it in for you right here. So, for the company name, right, if I type in directly over here, Boswell Consulting, okay, and I move on to the next one, it's going to automatically fill up the company name at the top here. Now, this is what you want to display in your list. So it's very important that you do recognize this right here because if you want to save some extra time, then you don't have to fill this section out. It will automatically fill it out for you. But let's say this is a particular person, then you definitely want to fill this out because this is the name that's going to appear on the vendor list, okay? Where this is going to be the information based upon that particular vendor. So if the Boswell Consulting isn't the vendor name or the company name that you want to display, then change it. You can change to Stephen Boswell. Okay, but in this case, that's exactly what I want. I want it to say Boswell Consulting. Okay, now the next part, it can be important if you deem necessary or if you've had transactions with this vendor for a while, then yes, you definitely want to add in a start date of when this person became your vendor. But most cases, I just leave it blank just because, or I just leave it like this just because, again, usually you would only enter in a new vendor, right, the day that you start making transactions with them. But if you're using an existing company, it's definitely that you do set these dates because especially when you've accumulated so many transactions with them, and let's say you do have an open invoice with them, you definitely want to make sure that the date that they became your vendor, it matches the date that you enter in your bill to, show that you have an open balance with them. So definitely, that's definitely something that you want to enter in. Now, if you're just entering in for the first time and you don't even know exactly how to pinpoint the exact date, then, just put them at the beginning of the year. Okay. But in this case, since I'm not going to be using Boswell Consulting at all for any of my transactions, I'm just going to leave the date. Okay. Now, the first thing I gotta do is I have to fill out the rest of information. So the first thing is, who is Boswell Consulting? Okay, there's always going to be someone is going to be the owner or whoever is going to be in charge of the actual agency. So in this case, his name is going to be Mr.
Stephen Boswell.
Stephen Boswell. No middle name?
No.
Stephen Boswell. Okay. And what is his job title? He is the owner. Okay. Main phone 5105555
0305.
0305. Okay, perfect. All right. Does he have a office work number? Yes, he does. Or a fax number? No, I think.
Number?
Huh? I'm sorry.
Work phone number
Okay, it's a work phone number. So
510 555 5500.
okay. All right. Does he have a main email? Yes, he does. It's Steve at Boswell right now. .us, I think. Okay. And then the website.
www.boswellrightnow.us.
Okay, good. So now, as I'm entering in my information, notice this. It's starting to piece things together. So that's the thing about QuickBooks, is that as you add more and more and more information into the system, you're going to notice that QuickBooks is going to start filling in things for you. So it makes it easier for you to fill out a form. Or in this case, it saves you some extra time. So in here, now my address, like as you can see here, it's already populating for me, right? It's Boswell Consulting. His name is Stephen Boswell. And what we're going to do is now we're going to be entering in the address for this. Okay, so I believe it's a P.O. box.
620.
620, okay.
Oakland,
Oak,
California.
Oakland, California.
946110.
94610. Okay, perfect. So here you go. This is filling in the billing information. Now, your billing information could be the same as your shipping information, right? Maybe Steven might give you a different shipping address because this is a post office box. You know, they don't not there's not that much space when it comes to a PO box. However, if his shipping and billing address is the same, then we could go ahead and use this little copy feature right here. So if I click on that copy feature, right, it's going to ask me, is this the address? And I'm going to go ahead and verify, and I click OK, and it's going to copy it directly on there. Okay. Now I can write Boswell Consulting and then have the address there instead of his name on there. Because if that's a shipping address, it's obviously going to go to Steven. Okay. So I can edit information just like that. But instead of having to type all that information once again, I can simply just carry it over. Just like that. Okay. So now I've only finished the first section. Okay. So don't click that OK button just yet. We need to keep filling in more information. So let's go ahead and look at the next section here. So payment. Payment. Okay. So here, this is where you are going to be creating the information that you have with Mr. Boswell. Okay. Because as the customer, right, you're putting your information in here, not his information. Okay, so payment. So what's my account number for Mr. Boswell Consulting?
66-112.
Okay. And then payment terms. So I believe this is, like, if you do the drop down menu, it also gives you a list of things that you can choose from. So in this case, I believe it's 2% 10 net 30.
Yes.
Okay. And then credit limit. So again, if Mr. Boswell decides to give you a credit limit, then you can go ahead and place it right there. So then you know how much services or things that you purchase from him, you can know how much your limit is. Okay. And usually QuickBooks will give you a notification, hey, you used too much, or your account is overdue, you have too much credit, etc., etc. Okay, but in this case, it's just a service, so there's really no credit limit there. Okay, and same thing with the price level, right? He's just a regular consultant. Okay, and then next thing is going to be what is going to be the name that you're going to be printing on the check. So again, this allows us to, when we write our checks, it's going to fill in the information, and every time I pay Steven or pay the company itself, it's going to ask me, well, what's the name I'm going to put on the check? And Boswell Consulting is just fine. Okay. So that's the payment for here for, us, the determining the terms that we receive and what our account number is. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the tax section. Now this is very important because this is also going to determine what type of vendor this person is. If they're a legitimate company, they will most likely have their own, and their own employer identification number. But in this case, right, when I'm looking at this particular individual, they are a independent contractor to me because this person is an individual consulting agency. Okay, they're not a legitimate company because the way that you can tell is that because this person provided me their social security number. If they provide you a social security number, you can definitely tell that this person is either the sole proprietor, the sole owner of this company, or they are an independent contractor. Okay, so independent contractors, they are unable to get an employee identification number because independent contractors, right, they are, their own individual type of service. They are responsible for paying their own taxes. So the one thing that we need to know about this section here is that when we pay Mr. Boswell, right, we're going to be keeping records in our system. So if one day Steve decides to call us up and say, hey, I'd like to have some proof that I did work for you, then they can get information from us to be able to help them out because they are an independent contractor, right? They can get any information from us because they completed a job or a task with us, right? It's proof. Now, the second thing too is that when we enter in the social security number, right? And we click on that this is a 1099 worker, what this does is QuickBooks is going to actually take that social security number and they're going to run it through the system to make sure that this individual is in fact an independent contractor, right? You definitely don't want to, or whoever you're doing the business with, the vendor, right? If they give you their social security number because they want to take a tax break because they say that, oh, I own a company, so if you can just, write that I did work for you, right, as an independent contractor when really they're not, then they can get in trouble with the IRS. They can get audited and stuff like that. But in this case, when you select this, it's going to check up when every time you process their check to them or anything that they're going to run their social security number just to ensure that that this person is truly an independent contractor. Okay, so here, what is the social security number?
123 12 1234.
Okay, so once again, I'm going to go ahead and click that this person is a 1099 worker. So there you go. Oh, I think I typed in too much. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and they are an independent contractor. Okay. So then this is also good for you because once again, every time you enter in pieces of information like this allows you to process your taxes even as well as too, saying, okay, well, this person was a mere expense to the company. You don't pay any taxes to him. Okay. So that's just the tax section right there, right? This is very important for independent contractors for the reason of having proof that they actually did a job. All right. Then we're going to go ahead to the next section here is what are going to be associated? What accounts are going or expenses that you deem is going to be associated with every time you use this person? So in this case, right, this is the same thing when we talk about every time you use a particular person, right, or every transaction that you do, right, it's going to link some kind of an associated account, right? That's why it's very important before we even begin doing a transaction, we need to make sure that our chart of accounts has the necessary accounts that we need in order to have a transaction work. Because when we enter any transaction, we need to be able to separate and split up the transactions in accordingly to where they need to be sorted. So in this case, it's going to be for professional fees. So I type in PRO, here it is, professional fees, right? It's an expense. So every time I use Boswell Consulting, right, they're a consulting group. So whether they're consulting us about our taxes or consulting us about how to run our business or even consulting on us how to I don't know, anything that has to do with consulting, maybe managing our taxes, managing our business, our sales, whatever it is, right? They're going to be considered a professional fee expense because they're providing a service for me. They're going to be consulting with me and my company for whatever reason I'm using them for. Okay, it's not specific. All right, so we just enter in only just that one account because they're only meant for that one expense. Okay, and then last but not least, we have the additional information. So once again, we've taken a brief look at this yesterday as well. Okay, when we deal with custom fields. Now, the first section here is going to be like, well, what kind of vendor type are they? In this case, right, we didn't talk too much about vendor types, but vendor types, once again, is a list of how you can categorize your vendors, right? You can either have them as, consulting, you can have them as suppliers, a tax agency, utilities, okay, or service provider, okay? So once again, vendor types is going to be something that you want to keep your, basically it's another way you could categorize or reorganize your vendors. Instead of just having them all in one specific place, just as, like a bunch of random people, right? That's just in your QuickBooks. You can sort them out even further by saying, well, this person is, this person does, XYZ, right? I can have independent contractors, right? So anybody that I deem as that wants to work for me, that I think should be that is applying as an independent contractor, you can separate them as well, right? Anything that does some kind of, once again, are they a supplier? Do you purchase from them? If you do, then make a category or make them a type, right? Now, of course, you don't absolutely need to use this. Once again, it's just to further your, further sort out your type of vendors, right? If you have a bunch of groups of people, right, you want to kind of tailor them to a specific type of service that they provide or whatever it is, right? Whether it's I'm paying utilities or this is my tax agency or I'm purchasing supplies from them, okay? Because when we talk about reports, which is towards the end of this chapter, you can create reports based on these vendor types. And then you're going to see, oh, okay, well, my company spent a lot of money on consulting than it is for buying supplies. Okay. Now, of course, we'll talk more into about reports later on, like I said, at the end of the book, and how it can be useful to you. But it just depends on what your position is in the company. Okay. So in this case, he's consulting. All right. And once again, we got to take a look at custom fields. So if you learn something about Steven, right, you can choose to either add the information in there or you can choose to not show any other extra information. So let's say if I just got to know him, I have no idea about any information that I find pertinent about him, then that's okay. But sometimes you may find other things like, right, if he's consulting for our company, right, it's definitely, maybe he can invite us to his, consulting party or, decide to say, invite everybody that he's consulting for and, have a celebration. Maybe he has a, 10-year anniversary coming up, right? Just like when the school had, their 10-year anniversary for, they invited all the people that they knew, all the clients, all the counselors that they knew. They invited them all to the school. So that's a cool thing that you can do too, is if they do have those kind of things. So once again, we're taking a look right here. That we have things like county. County definitely can apply, especially when we're looking at, taxes. Maybe we can look at taxes. We can also see, like, does it take for them a long time to travel to us? I don't know. Okay, so there's few information there. So other things that you can do is, what if you found out you knew Steven's wife's name? Okay. maybe you found out that Steven, you know, he's a vendor, right? You can definitely find the business establishment date, right? So then if they do invite you to a company party, or for any reasons that you feel that you want to send, um, a congratulations type of gift, right? Definitely that's going to strengthen your relationship with this vendor. So I'm going to go ahead and do business establishment date, which only applies to to a vendor. And I'm going to say, well, what if I learned if this person has any hobbies? Okay, right? And let's say I found out they have a pet. I'm going to change this and write pets, so then it's not like I give them a name. Right? And I'm going to say it's going to apply to everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Oh, what does this say now? Oh, yeah, that's right. You would just click OK. And it will just populate everything. So first things first is I found out maybe Steven's wife, right? I met him, right? And he talked about his wife. So I learned that his wife's name is, I don't know, Linda. Linda Boswell. Okay. County. I forgot. What county does it belong to? Alameda. I think so. And then let's see, business start date. Maybe he established his company, I don't know, January 25th, 2010. Okay, I don't know. And let's say we found out his hobbies was he likes to go skiing. I don't know. Okay. And then let's say he does have a pet's name. His pet name, he has a dog named Mike. Milo. Okay. Dog named Milo. Okay. So again, these things are used for strengthening the relationship between you and the person that you're, trying to develop a relationship, whether it's your customer, vendor, or employee. So in this case, you can always end up having that, conversation with them. Oh, hey, how's your wife Linda? She doing great? Cool. And your dog Milo? Okay. So now that I finished the last section here in the vendors, we could go ahead and click OK. So once we do that, it should be the first thing that pops up. And once again, if I click on him, it's only going to show me the minor details, right? Or the more important details. It's not going to show you, oh, like this is his account information, or his wife's name is Linda, right? That is not something that you have to actually double click and actually look into. So if you decide to give, Steven a call, this is okay. Now, this is also one of those things too, right? If you have QuickBooks and you're holding all this information, right? Now, if you have 1 million customers, right? Do you think you're able to know all the information about them? Probably not. If you have 1 million customers, you might know, maybe you'll recognize their name, but you're not going to know any small details. So that's also one of the good things about QuickBooks is that it holds those information. So then if I decide to call Steven Boswell, right? I could just take a glance at his profile real quick and be like, yes, his wife's name is Linda. Yes, he has a dog named Milo. Oh, did he go skiing at the Alps over the summer? You can start creating those conversations, and the next time you call him, you can just start pretending, obviously. Oh, yeah, how's this? Right? So that's one thing, too, is that it carries information that could be pertinent for you to help you build your relationship. So that's how we add in our vendor. Any questions? No? All right, let me just go ahead and find where I'm going at. So here, activating class. Okay. Okay. So when we talk of so is there no questions in regards to adding a vendor? Right? Pretty straightforward. Exactly like when we fill in a form, you're just filling in all the bubbles that you know. And if you don't know, that's okay. You can always edit the information at any given time.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and see what happens in the next section. So the next section is talking about activating class tracking. Now, if you read through the book, you're probably going to be like, wait, what does this even mean? So basically, we can organize our expenses and income based on a particular section, or in this case, right? We can use class tracking to keep track of our income expenses based on either location, department, profit centers, or even line of business. Okay, so for example, right, we got PepsiCo. PepsiCo, right? You can split up all of their departments because not only do they just serve soft beverages, right? They have a line for their waters. They have a line for juices, and they also have a product line for their teas. Okay, so they're a very expansive type of business, right? And the one thing that they can do is they can actually use that for their advantage to see which product actually does better. So, like I've listed all those things, right? They can sell soda, water, tea, juice, or even whatever, right? They can sell those kind of types of items. So when we look at that, right, if we can organize our expense and income based on those criterias, right? Basically, what you're doing is you're just furthering organizing your expenses and your income based on another criteria. So you're just sorting it out even further. Now, what's useful about that is that you're also able to run more reports and you can actually pin them against each other. So PepsiCo, right? What do you guys actually know PepsiCo primarily for?
Pepsi.
For their soda, right? So you would think that their soda soft drinks line is going to do a lot better. Okay, but you can take that information and you could say, well, how much money am I actually investing in just the soft drinks area? Right? You could run a report and you could see all the expenses. Maybe I'm buying a lot of syrups, I'm buying a lot of the ingredients because my main core of my company is my soft drinks. However, if you didn't know, I believe Aquafina belongs to PepsiCo. I believe Pure Leaf is also PepsiCo. All right, those are tea leaf tea brands. I believe can't remember, but they do have some juices that are also PepsiCo. All right, you would have to look at the label to know exactly that it came from PepsiCo. But however, they do offer that. So then I could look and compare, saying, okay, well, which areas should I invest more of my expenses in? Definitely water, because water is a necessity, right? Water is something that they need to do. So you can compare and contrast. Like obviously, the soft drinks are going to be the most part where the company's generating income. Most of their income is through the soft drinks. However, you can actually pinpoint which one is actually more profitable and where your expenses should be distributed more often. Okay, so that's what I mean by just taking your transaction and breaking it down even further and further categorizing them and separating them because it can be useful, especially if your company, right, has more than one store. And that's exactly what Academy Photography has. It has 2 store locations, right? It has one in San Jose and it has one in Walnut Creek. So the great thing here is I can divide if I have to pay rent for San Jose, right? Then I say that I'm going to pay my rent and it's going to be specifically for the San Jose location. So there I can take my expenses and I can further then break it down and make sure that I can see, well, which one is doing better? Is my San Jose location doing better? Am I putting more in? Am I putting more expenses towards it? Am I generating more income towards it? You can run your reports based on that. So let's go ahead and turn on our class tracking. So once again, you're gonna go to your edit preferences. Okay, so we'll edit preferences. Oh, wrong one. Edit preferences, okay? And this is going to be an accounting preference. So go to accounting. And of course, this is a company preference because if you allow class tracking to be something that's part of the company file, it's going to be, that means anybody that accesses it can have the ability to be able to see it. So here we go under class. Now it says right here that it's already selected. So if you do utilize the class tracking, which once again, if you have a reason to split your expenses and your income based on one of those criteria, right? So whether it's a location, department, profit center, line of business, right? Or anything that you see necessary to be able to split, then you can go ahead and use it. And once again, it's very useful, especially for your profit managers and your cost managers, right? Because they're going to be taking a look at the expenses and income, right? So once again, we'll take a look at that class tracking in a few examples, but let's go ahead and see what is next. So once again, there's another section called job costing. Now, job costing, basically, we won't learn more in depth with this for this chapter. It is definitely something that you're going to do with chapter 2 and chapter 9. So what job costing does is that we can actually assign jobs to particular customers. Okay? So that's why it's a customer / jobs or customer :jobs, right? So a good example is if I'm doing a custom job for a specific customer. Let's say one of my customers decide I want to order a camera from you. All right, but the camera doesn't exist in my my inventory. I have to purchase it through my vendor. So I can actually create a custom order for that particular person, and I can assign that person that this camera belongs to this specific person because I'm making a custom order particularly for this person. Okay, so once again, because we're not dealing with any customers here in chapter 4, but we will get to see like what I mean when we order a particular part, because for the example you will see it, and on top of this is chapter 4, so you should have already learned it already. But in this case, what the use for the custom or job costing itself is to assign a specific job or a task, or if you make a purchase for that person, you can assign the expense or income to that particular customer. Okay? That's all that is. All right, so next thing is going to be talking about how we pay our vendors. Straightforward. There's only 3 ways you can pay your vendor. Okay? You can either pay them with a manual check, right? Because a check is going to be considered the most, I guess let me start that sentence one more time. A check is going to be the most useful item when it comes to keeping track of your transactions because it can create a paper trail, right? A check has a checking number on it and it has the exact check number, right? Not your checking account number, but your check number. It gives you a record keeping type of information that is very important, especially when you cut checks, right? If you can assign a number, or we'll talk about that in QuickBooks, that you can utilize the QuickBooks write a checks option, which allows you to use Intuit's section where you can actually create your checks from your QuickBooks application, right? It's going to keep a good record of your transactions, right? If you write check number 101, 102, 103, 104, right? It pretty much does the work for you by keeping track of the bills that you pay, the expenses that you write, right? It's a paper trail, or you have a receipt attached to it. And it's also easy to also keep track of, once again, if I write a check out, there's not only just my person, right? There's also that little section where you can write what this is for, okay? So again, writing a manual check is going to be, yes, a very good thing that you need to do for a business because it keeps your business a lot more organized, especially when you're dealing with credit vendors, okay? Now, we also talked about, you could just simply pay cash, it's not a problem, but the only thing that you have to do is that most common people, right, when they go to any store and they get a receipt, they either trash it or it just piles up somewhere. So that's the one thing too, is that cash is one of the probably least likely kind of form of transaction that has some kind of paper trail to it. Your only source of that transaction is your receipt. And once again, you can attach every single receipt, but think about how tedious that is when you have to constantly be keeping track of every single expense that you make. At least with a check, it's a little more easier, right? You just cut the check and then it will appear in your bank system, right? So writing a manual check is going to be one of those. And then again, I just briefly talked about this. We're going to also take a look at utilizing the write a checks function in QuickBooks, where you're able to actually write your checks using the Intuit application. Okay, and then also, last but not least, you are going to be utilizing the credits or the accounts payable section, where we actually enter in a bill and then we actually proceed by making the payment by clicking the bill pay. Okay, so we're going to take a look at all three and what all three do. Now, when we are looking at writing a manual check, all right, there's two things that you need to know. When you actually write the manual check, right, the one thing that you have to do is you need to update your QuickBooks because your checking account is going to look different, okay? So every transaction that you do, whether it's a physical transaction, you need to be able to update it into QuickBooks so then you can update your checking account at all times. So again, if you're not using the write a checks function in QuickBooks and you're out there and you're just cutting checks for all your expenses, the great way to keep track of it is by entering them into your system. So for this example here, we're going to take a look at using the checking register. So how we actually get to do that is, let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and close my window. Okay. The first one that you'll be able to have access to that is under your banking section on your homepage is right here. you have the check register, right? You click on that, and then it's going to ask you, well, which account are you looking forward in, okay? Make sure you're in your checking account. And once you click OK, now you're going to get that ledger looking type of ordeal, right? Where you can enter in the transaction right here, okay? So that is how, remember, if you go, remember back in chapter 1, we can enter in a transaction using 3 things: a form, a list, or a register. So this is one of the things that we can go ahead, and I'll show you an example how to enter it in there directly into the register itself, okay? That's one way to access it, okay? Second way to access it is going to, again, you're going to go to your banking menu at the very top. And of course, you're going to see use register. And then once again, you're going to get that same window. Make sure you're in your checking account and you're going to click OK. And there you're at it, at your checking account. Okay. And of course, the last way to be able to access the check register is if you go to your chart of accounts, right? We talked about how the chart of accounts is a list of every single account that exists in your books, right? And we talked about how your permanent accounts will have registers. So if you go ahead and take a look at my checking, and if you double click on it, boom, it will take you directly to the checking register, okay? And notice this, and then if you want a quick overview of your chart of accounts, you can see that your checking register right now has $11,564 in the checking account, okay? So again, I'm going to double click on it, and there it is, okay? My checking account. Okay, so now we're going to explore on how we actually enter in a transaction by just entering it in here. All right, so first things first is we got to recognize the date. I believe they said that this one's going to be February 8th. So as you notice this, right, the minute you open up QuickBooks, it's going to automatically assume that it's taking the date as of today. So it says that today is April 29 of 2021. Yes, it is April 29 of 2021. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that it's because it's pulling information from the internet. As long as you're connected to the internet, here it's getting the most recent date, which is today's date. Now, of course, what you can do with QuickBooks is you can retroactively enter in any past transactions. The only situation here is you will get flagged. You will see that they'll be past due or things like that. But again, because we're working with QuickBooks 2018 files, right? We have to go back into the past and enter everything in for, you know, the accounts to work. So in this case, I need to go all the way in here. Now, here's one thing, all right? They recommend you to never type in your answers, because if you type it in, right, then you can, you know, pose a discrepancy, right? Sometimes QuickBooks will take it, sometimes QuickBooks will not. So the best recommendation is that when you're entering in a date, use this little calendar icon, okay? Because, you know, if I'm going to type it in as 0207-2019, then you can use it. But once again, this one is pretty much, it's a quick and easy one, and it will make sure it's more accurate. You just have to spend a little time because this transaction was in 2019. Okay, oh, keep going. Okay, so February 2019, the 8th. Okay. So as you can see in gray, it kind of tells you what you need to add in here. So this one just says number. What does that mean? So in this case, we're going to be entering our manual check number. So in this case, when I cut the check, right, you should have updated your little register in your checkbook. Obviously, if you don't do that, then you're not doing a very good job keeping a good record of your checkbook. So you should be able to associate what check number that you actually written out for, not the check number that you just decided that you want to create. It has to match the one that you wrote the check out for. So in this case, it is check number, I think it's 331. Oh, once again, I'm in the wrong window. Okay, so I have to do this all over again. February 2019. Oh. February 8. So make sure that you're here. Now it tells me that it's got to be 332. Well, no, it's 331, right? And then once you've typed that in there, it should tell you that it should be a check. Okay? Now it says here you're going to put the payee that you or the vendor's name, right? The payee. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and type in Bay Office Supply. Now notice this. If I type in B, it's going to pull up all of my people that I have listed for, right? Either whether they're a vendor or a customer or they're just a particular person, right? Anybody that's in my list that starts with a B. So in here, as you can see, I have Bob Mason, I have Boswell Consulting, XYZ, right? In this case, I actually am entering somebody, a person, because in this case, I was driving down the street and I saw that they had an office supply store, so I swung by and I just picked up some office supplies. So in this case, they're just a random store that we stopped by and purchased office supplies from. So in this case, Bay Office Supply. Okay? Bay Office Supply. Now notice this. Okay? There are two things that you can do. Okay? You need to ingrain in your mind that Enter is not your best friend. QuickBooks solemnly uses the tab button. Okay? Because Excel, right, your best friend is the Enter key. In this case, if you press in Enter, you're entering a transaction. Okay, you're completing your transaction. Tab allows you to move across the little open spaces. So if I click on my tab, then it's going to recognize me. It's going to notify me that, hey, we've never seen this vendor before. Do you want a quick add or do you want to set them up? So if I've mentioned this before, you can create almost any single transaction as you go. Now that's the dangers of QuickBooks, is because, once again, you may be adding a bunch of accounts you're just creating as you go. And then when you go check up your chart of accounts list, you're going to notice that you created too many of the same exact account. So again, usually, you want to try to make sure that you exhaust every means to find that account. And if you absolutely cannot find it in that account, then you enter it in. So in this case, I've never had this person exist in my vendors at all. So what I'm going to do is, instead of setting it up right then and there, I'm just going to do a quick add and I will enter in the information later on. So once I click on quick add, it's going to tell me, well, what person is this? Is it a vendor? Is it an employee? Is it a customer? Or is it another person? In this case, it's a vendor. And I'm going to click OK. So once again, my my Bay Office Supplies, they are just a vendor, right? They will show up on my vendors list, but there's no information on there because I have to go back and edit and fix all the information if I want to, all right? So I've already entered in my payee. Now the next thing is to enter in the account. In this case, I bought office supplies, right there, office supplies. And you can either tab or you can click, okay? So they're office supplies. All right, now what was the amount for? I believe it was like $128.60. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I typed in that amount. Now let's look at this. Let's notice this. Right now, my bank account has $11,564, right? By entering in this right here And now I filled out my entire thing, right? Except for my memo. My memo is purchase office supplies. Okay. Now that my transaction is completely done, I filled in all the bubbles, right? Now I can go ahead and validate my transaction by pressing that enter key. And then you should get that beep of approval. And once you get that beep of approval, check it out. By me entering in this $128.60, boom, it automatically updates my checking account. So once again, that's the really cool thing about QuickBooks is it does the work for you. So you don't have to sit there and calculate. You don't have to sit there and enter in any formulas. It will do the work all for you. Okay? Any questions there? Okay. So that's how you use the register. You could just enter in the transaction right then and there. Okay? All right. And see, like I said, like once I've entered it, it automatically associates that this is a check. Okay. So the cool thing about taking a look at this is that what if I need to fix this transaction for any reason? All right. You could simply click underneath the date right on this check number, right? I could double click on it. Or okay, underneath the date right here. You can double click on it, and what's going to happen is it's going to pop up a window. And this window allows you to modify the check number, the amount number. Let's say if you fat fingered accidentally, I put 158 instead of 128, right? You can modify this as much as possible, as whenever you feel like it, okay? Now, the general rule of thumb is you shouldn't do it as often just because you don't want to have any holes or discrepancies. But once again, this is an application that's supposed to help humans produce more accurate data. But of course, 95% of the time, who's entering in the data? The human is. So most of the errors that you find in the QuickBooks is going to come from a human entering in the data. Okay, so whether you fat figured something or maybe you entered in the wrong date, etc., then you're going to have to, edit it upon your mistake. Now, again, let's say I need to get rid of this check for any reason, then you may need to have, permission from the accountant to go ahead and do so. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that when we modify this check, right? Then we talked about class tracking, right? I bought office supplies. Now, when I bought these office supplies, I made a general assumption here that I just bought office supplies in general. I didn't link it to anybody or I didn't separate my expenses. But in this case, what you can do is you can actually go in and actually split the cost by the class. So here, my total is 128, right? And as you see here, I have my account, right? I'm going to expand it so you guys can see, right? I have an account, office supplies, and here it's for the amount of the 128.60. Now, in this case, I didn't just buy office supplies solely for just for the business itself. I actually bought office supplies, right? I bought printer paper for my San Jose location, and I end up buying internet cables for my Walnut Creek location, or vice versa. I think. In the book, it should be no. I think it's I bought the printer paper for the San Jose location printer paper. Yes, I bought the printer paper for the San Jose location while I spent $28.60 to the Walnut Creek location. So now I can go ahead and split this up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and recognize that I purchased internet cables, right? So in this case, this is going to be, let me see, it's going to be an internet expense. So here, interest expense, and then here, computer and internet expense right here. So there you go. I have the account that existing there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this because I only spent $100 for the printer paper here. And I spent $28.60 for the internet cables. Okay. So I can split the cost right here. And of course, your check number, right? It's going to stay the same. And it will flag you in case you do a typo. So once again, if I accidentally wrote 5860, it will flag you down saying, hey, your numbers do not match. Well, okay, in this case, I didn't do it. It's supposed to say, see, but it won't let you proceed with the thing because the numbers do not match. Okay, so my 2860 does definitely not match my 158. Okay, so when you enter in the transaction, it will not let you proceed. Okay, so 2860. So then now I'm going to go ahead and write a memo here. So I'm going to write, I purchased the printer paper. And this one is internet cables. Okay. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and assign it to a specific location because my book tells me, hey, you actually purchased the printer paper. Right here I have class. I purchased the printer paper for my San Jose location, and I end up buying the internet cables for my Walnut Creek location. So as you can see, these ones are already preset in here, right? I've already spoken to you guys that the class tracking that they use for Academy Photography is split between the two different store locations, San Jose and Walnut Creek. So in this case, I'm dividing up my expenses because I bought office supplies, right? But in here, I bought specific office supplies for a specific store. So here I'm splitting my expenses up and organizing or setting that that this is the expense I made for this particular location. So there you have it. And I can go ahead and click Save and Close. Okay. And then I get an error message saying, okay, you have changed this transaction. Important thing is that QuickBooks will always notify you if you make any adjustments or any changes to the actual transaction. You're going to go ahead and click yes, right? And once again, if you have your sound on, you should get your beep of approval, okay? Any questions there? And notice this. Now, if I take a look at my my check here, it says it's been split. Okay. So once again, using class tracking is, it only organizes and, allows you to produce more, more better reports, especially if you're tailoring it to a specific whether you're breaking it down, your expenses and your income even more down based on if you have a location, line of business, right? It just helps you to produce more accurate reports. Okay. And of course, if you forget to enter in all that stuff, you can always go back to your transactions and just fill those information in. Okay. Any questions on how to make a split payment?
No questions.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and show you this last part before we go on a break. So the next part here is that we are going to be looking at using the write a checks function. Okay, let me keep scrolling down. Okay. So once again, QuickBooks allows it to be that much more easier for you to go ahead and write checks and send them out to your individual people. Now, of course, I've mentioned this a couple times before, right? You can't just write a check and print it on a simple piece of paper. You need to go get an actual legitimate notarized piece of paper, right? The actual legitimate treasury paper, right? The one with the the encrypted holographic imprint on them, right? The one that actually says this is a legal document that can be used as currency. You need to get that from the bank, okay? And so here's the option here. If a company is able to print checks, right, you need to have that thing. You can also write the checks out and send a copy to your bank and have them print out the checks for you. That is an option too. But just one thing, if you end up using the write a checks option for QuickBooks, you can order the checks directly from Intuit with all your information. So once again, you can either use that option, right? But this is just only in case you don't have a manual checkbook and you don't want to use cash. And this seems to be the easiest way to enter in your transaction. And that way, you don't have to cut the check and then come back to QuickBooks and enter that transaction in to your check register. You can automatically do it by using the write a checks function in QuickBooks, which allows you to update your checking account and it allows you to produce your check and allows you to print it, send it, email it. Not email it, but mail it out, etc., etc. So that's one thing that QuickBooks can do for you. So instead of, like, once again, writing a manual check, right? It can create the check for you. So once again, on your homepage under banking, you have the write a checks function right here. Okay, and let's go ahead and just click on it and see what happens. So once again, it's that same exact window that we just took a look at. And in this case, it's a little more extensive, right? You can take a look at, you can enter in your information, you can enter in the date, the vendor, of course, or whoever you're making the check out to. So that is the write a checks function. Now, I'm also going to show you the other ways to be able to write a check as well. You can also go up to the banking menu, okay? And you can go ahead and the first thing that you see is write a checks, okay? Right? So that's two ways. And then, of course, if you go into your chart of accounts, right? Chart of accounts. And you right click on your checking account, you'd be able to write a check that way too. Okay? Write a check. Okay? You also might be able to do it in your customer, your vendors, right? You have that write a checks option. But as far as looking at the easiest way or the most common way would be through your banking system. You definitely don't want to go through this unless you for surely are making a decision whether you are paying a specific vendor or not. But you do have the option there too. So if I go to my vendor center, right, I can right click on them, or I can do click on the transaction. Not this one, but if I were to go ahead and click on this, I can actually write a check to them if I need to pay a bill, of course. But most cases, you won't ever usually use it. Usually you wouldn't be able to do it. It's not recommended to do it through this way. It's recommended to just use your banking system and just write the check off through there. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and write the check. So there's a bunch of ways you can write a check, but the main three is going to be your home page, your banking menu bar, and then again in your chart of accounts, you can right click on your checking account and be able to write a check there. Okay. Oh, and also, of course, you can manually write the check right in by using the register, which we just took a look at an example of. Okay, but of course, you wouldn't use that to write a check, right? We want to actually look at the details when it comes to looking at writing the check. So here, once again, gives us a little summary of what our bank account holds, right? You definitely want to ensure that this check is being written out from your checking account. Usually when you open up your checks, it will give you this piece of information right here. It will tell you, hey, which account are you actually writing this check out from? Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and close this out and go out to the main frame because I clicked on a person. Okay, and I'm going to click no. No. And no. So I'm gonna, okay, I closed out my home page by accident. So go to your home page, right? First one is that you see on your home page is the write a checks function. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on that, and there you go. So I'm starting out from scratch. Nobody's name's in there. First thing you're gonna check is that you're in your checking account. There's your check balance. And then, so here is where it's important that you need to know. So as you can see, right, it's associating that I'm going to write a manual check. In this case, I'm not going to write a manual check. My manual check numbers are my 300 numbers, right? In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ensure that I go ahead and click on print later, okay? When I do that, notice this, my check number has disappeared. When you click on pay or print later, what's going to happen is it's not going to assign the check number right away. It's going to wait till when you have all of your checks readily available to go ahead and print, right? You can print multiple checks at one time instead of printing one check at a time. You can just, enter in all your checks or enter in all your bills and make payments to them. And what you're going to do is that you can save all of your checks to later and then print them all at once, okay? But if you decide to print right then and there, another key factor is that you're going to have your person sign off all the checks, because that's what makes a check valid, right? If you're printing it now, that means someone has to go and actually physically sign the check. When we come back from the break, I will show you how to actually print all the checks and actually insert the signature. So once again, here we're at the checking, and this time we're going to make a rent payment. So here my person is going to be Orlando Properties. So notice this, I just typed in ORL, and what do you know? I already have that person as an existing person in my books. So I'm gonna either click on it or you can just click tab. Okay. Other things I need to make sure is the date. So it is going to be February 8th. And notice this. Do I need to assign the number now? You can if you'd like, but you can also enter in down below, and it will automatically take that number right above. Okay, so I'm going to leave that at 0. And so here, my memo is I am paying rent for San Jose location, right? Again, your memo and your description could be whatever it is, right? It doesn't have to be word for whatever it is in the book, but as long as it's the general idea, because this is what's going to make sure that you remember what this transaction was for. I'm making it more specific by saying this is rent for the San Jose location. Okay. So once again, because we'll talk about this in chapter 13, or actually chapter 6, sorry, about memorizing your transaction. Okay, so once again, I just typed in Orlando Properties, and it automatically associated that I'm going to be paying rent expense. So again, what's the amount? I believe it's $3,200. Sounds about right for a San Jose location. Okay. Memo here. So once again, I just typed it in here, and it automatically filled it in for me at the very top of the window. Okay. So again, there's a lot of shortcuts that you can do. Instead of having to type it in here and then having to type it in here again, you could just save yourself time, and it will automatically update that for you. Okay. Memo. Rent for San Jose location. Okay. And once again, I'm going to assign this expense or sort out this expense based on my class, because this expense is dedicated to my San Jose location. All right. And once everything looks good, the date looks good, the amount looks good, the person that you're writing the check out to, right, it's going to have their address on it, because ultimately it's going to be sent to them, right? And everything looks good. I filled in all my information, my memo and everything. And then we could go ahead and click Save and Close. Now, notice this. What's the difference between save and close and save and new? Save and close means you're done with this transaction and you're going to just close out the window. If I go ahead and click save and new, a new check just pops up. Okay? So once again, if you are in charge of making your accounts the accounts payable, this is going to be most useful for you because you're going to be entering all your transactions, writing all your bills or all your checks. You can write them all simultaneously or all at once. So that's what the difference between save and close is, and save and new. So save and close basically just validates the transaction and it clears out your window and you're just going to go back to your home page. In this case, I clicked save and new, which it saved my check, but at the same time, it opened up a new window because I'm going to be writing another check for something else. So in this case, I'm not going to be doing that, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys know that that is what it is. Okay? And then, of course, you're going to close it by the little X on the gray button, on the gray tab, not the blue tab, because the blue tab is going to actually close out the whole entire program. So there's two X's in here. So frequent students do accidentally close out the whole thing. So here, just know that there's two X's, right? The one that's in the tan or the gray, that's usually the window that you're looking at. The top is completely exiting out of the program. Okay? So I just wrote the check. Okay? And that's how you use the write a checks function in your QuickBooks. Okay? And we'll take a look at how to print them out after the break. Okay? Any questions? Okay, this one's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Okay, no questions? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick 15-minute break here. And then when we come back, we're going to dive right into the accounts payable section.